What's happening, everybody? Welcome into a brand new episode of Crossed Up. Anthony Sanfilippo's here. I'm Bob Wankel. Anthony, let's jump right into it, man. Hope you had a good weekend. Phillies out west playing the Rockies over the weekend and then heading into San Francisco for 3 games with the Giants this upcoming week. We have finally reached the quarter point of this season. Phillies get another series victory over the weekend. And Anthony, they are one of 6 teams in the National League after 40 games that do not have a losing record. They're the only team with a 500 record, but only one of 6 teams without a losing record. I guess we should feel good about everything we saw this weekend, right?
Well, for the most part. I mean, it was for the most part, it was a decent weekend for the team. Are there still some red flags? Of course there are. And I think that they're going to be there for a little bit. And they're going to have to be addressed, before the deadline. But I do think that for the, you're not happy losing the way that they lost yesterday. Well, I'm sure we're going to dive into some of those stats. But at the same time, we talked about it last week. You win 2 out of 3. Okay. And then you win 2 out of 3 in San Francisco. Okay. Come away 4-2. That's fine. It would be better if it was 5-1 than 4-2, of course. But yeah, I think that we're on track right now with what we kind of expected from this road trip. It can't go sideways against Gabe and his boys this next 3 days, though.
Well, it's like I texted you earlier, or actually I texted you, I should say not earlier, we're recording this on Monday morning. I texted you after the game against the Rockies and on Sunday, and I said, it's just like, hey, good weekend. We saw the stat, Saturday night. This is the Phillies' first series victory over the Rockies in Colorado in like a decade. We know that the Rockies had actually been playing pretty good baseball lately. 8 of their last 10 coming into that series, they had won. So like, yeah, you go 2 out of 3, that's great. But it's like this team just can't deal with prosperity, right? Like, God forbid you sweep. God forbid you get over 500 and stay over 500. Like, go up 2 games, maybe even 3 games with like a series win over the Giants this week. But it's like incremental progress. And I think you get to that quarter pole, and given the way it started, you just feel okay about the big picture. I mean, right now, as we talk, they are holding the 3rd and final wild card spot. And the Braves over the weekend were swept by the Toronto Blue Jays, who the Phillies just swept in a 2-game series. Now the Phillies are only 5 games out, but it's like every time this team has an opportunity to really make that move. And we saw this last year. We've seen this for a number of years with this team until, they got to the postseason last year, really. It's like they just can't keep their foot on the gas. So I am a little bit irritated. I'm certainly irritated by 0 for 14 with runners in scoring position in the finale against the Rockies. But I will tell you that if you step back and breathe it all in, I think that the Phillies are in a pretty decent spot right now and are coming off of a pretty good weekend.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I kind of agree with you. The 0 for 14, that bothers me, right? I mean, we talked about this before.
It's insane. Like 0 for 14 is insane.
It's one of my pet peeves in baseball in general, but it really bothers me when the Phillies are this bad at it. If you get a runner in scoring position and it's not that they can't even get a hit. I mean, that's bad enough, but they don't even move the runner. The runner gets to second base, and it's like, all right, let's just anchor down. And we're not getting them to third. Forget it. Ain't happening. We're not even going to try. Like, that's what drives me nuts in the sport. And it's the one thing that I think is still prevalent in Major League Baseball, but it's really exacerbated by the fact that the Phillies really aren't good at it in general. Other than a couple guys that, you get runner at second base, is like, there's no guarantee that guy's even getting to third. Like, it's crazy to me. So yes, that drives me a little bit nuts. But like you said, it's in a good spot. And I wrote this, and I don't want to sound like, well, the guy who's saying, well, take this out, and I'm just being selective, and to make an argument. And I'm not trying to make an argument, but you do look at it and say, man, if it wasn't for 2 weeks in this season, this Phillies team would be in a pretty good team, right? I mean, you start 1-5, and you have a 6-game losing streak. That's 1-11 out of a 20-20. Okay, so they're 19-9 except for the bad start and the bad week in LA, and that Houston, last game of Houston, the LA trip, and then the first 2 of the Boston series. So yes, I mean, you look at the rest and say 19-11. Well, that's really good, and you can't discount, or 19-9 is really good. You can't discount the 1-11 because it happened. But if you're looking forward, I think you could take more out of the 19-9 than you can out of the 1-11.
Right. Well, I mean, I think when you get back to the runners in scoring position thing, it's obviously been a theme on this show. We've talked about it quite a bit. We've rolled out stats on occasion. And so coming off of an 0 for 14, of course, I look and I start to dig into it this morning before the show. And I'm like, okay, so where does that put them for the season? Now they're down to 242 team average with runners in scoring position, which is 23rd in baseball. And I've harped on the OPS. It's not just about batting average, but it's like, are you doing damage? Are you able to produce hits that are scoring multiple runs? And I look at it and I see 661 OPS, 27th in baseball, and they're still tied for dead last with homers with runners in scoring position. And then you kind of step back and say, forget about runners in scoring position, but just what about men on base, period? And I would tell you this, that only 5 teams have hit fewer home runs with runners on base this season than the Phillies. They've hit 14 home runs with a runner on base. And just to give some context to that, the Braves have hit 28. The Giants, this week's opponent, have hit 27. Like, this team has shown a stunning inability now for a quarter of the season to do it with runners on base, and certainly with runners in scoring position. So you can sit there and be annoyed by what you see on Sunday in the finale and say they had a chance to sweep, and man, was that a frustrating game. And like, that's a little bit unfair because it's one game and an otherwise pretty solid weekend, no less. But you look at the big picture and you go like, what is the deal? Like, you can explain it for a game or a week or 2 weeks, but like, it's been a month and a half now. It's been 7 weeks and they still haven't been able to get this part of the equation going. And it's just amazing. It really is.
Yeah. And I don't know what the solution is or what the answer is, Bob. I mean, look, I like to think that they're a little all over the place. They're a real roller coaster ride in a lot of ways because, you look at the first game of this series, and where they just chased the hell out of the ball against Austin Gomber. And that first, we were thinking 5.5 innings into that game that they were going to set a record for the fastest game in the history of Major League Baseball. That's how it was moving. And then, of course, it got bogged down when they finally decided to hit a little bit and remembered that, oh yeah, we're facing Austin Gomber, not Sandy Koufax here. And they finally started taking some pitches. So, like, you like the fact that they figured that out. Being aggressive was not the right choice. You needed to be more patient with this guy. He does walk some guys, and you get yourself into better counts, you're going to drive the ball. Okay, good. But then it seems like when they get runners on base that there is a lack of aggressiveness, right? It kind of like changes. Like, they don't want to be aggressive, and I think that that's a time when I wish they were a little bit more aggressive and took advantage of a first pitch fastball right down the middle that they're standing there watching, waiting for something in a different spot in the zone. Like, I wish they were more aggressive there. So it's a little bit of a conundrum with the Phillies because they flip-flop back and forth between the way they approach it. And I'm not sure that they even know what kind of team they want to be at this point. And it's still probably trying to figure it out in a lot of ways because, we keep talking about the fact that the lineup is not exactly the lineup that they thought they were going to have right at the start of the season, and still trying to identify who's going to be, what role. But at some point, you gotta pick something and just go with it. You can't keep flip-flopping back and forth because I think that creates these environments where you go 0 for 14 with runners in scoring position.
Right. And listen, I mean, we spend a lot of time on this show. I mean, the way that our specific show sort of ebbs and flows, it's, hey, what's going on in a positive? So let's highlight that, accentuate that. And then what are we seeing that we don't like? What concerns us? Let's talk about that. And one of the weird things, I feel like in years past, we would kind of have more variance in the things that concerned us, or there would be a concern and then it would be alleviated the next week and then a new concern would pop up. But this season, I think I just sort of feel like we keep coming back to the same things. And so on that note, I'll say it was positive to see Alec Boehm drive a baseball over the weekend. Didn't happen as much as I would have liked it to, but it was nice to see that go in a different direction because we had just talked about that. Bryson Stott got on base a few times, so like there was some positive momentum on those two specific concerns. But it's like when you come back to the things that bother you, when you start to pick apart, okay, well, the lineup isn't doing what you want it to do, especially with runners in scoring position. And you keep coming back to guys like Trey Turner and Kyle Schwarber. And it's just like, it's the same conversation over and over again. Like, I don't know how many more times we can get on here right now at this point and say, like, man, what is going on with Trey Turner? Like, and then now, like, to add a new dimension to the conversation, just to kind of get off of the offensive part of it for a second, like Trey Turner, like I gotta say, like, I know I noted this last week. I believe that when it's all said and done, when we get to October, when we get 3 years into this contract, everyone will look at the production overall and say, good signing. This makes sense. He's done what you would reasonably expect him to do. But right now, the first 40 games, just forget the offense for a second. Like what we watched with him over the weekend defensively is just like, I don't even know the word. I don't want to, because concerning it's obvious to say it's concerning. It just seems lazy. It seems unfocused. He, the throwing error on Sunday, making Nola throw more pitches. I know that he didn't get dinged for an unearned run there, but like Turner helped expand that inning. He like allowed that to play out the way it did in the first. And then you have the line drive late on Saturday night where the ball goes right through his glove and he just looks at it and he's like, oh, well, like it's a really weird watch with him right now.
It really is. And I just want to go back to the beginning of what you said real quick, and then I'll talk about Turner. We can talk about Alec Boehm. Nice to see him drive the ball. He actually, I will say this too, he almost got another one yesterday and ended up hitting that ball foul by about 6 to 8 feet, but drove it really well. And I thought it was going to be another home run. So again, another good sign that maybe he's coming out of that, weeks long doldrum. And you mentioned Stott too. Also, I thought he had a nice game. But yeah, Turner, I don't know what to make of it, Bob, because he's not even close on fastballs. Not even close when he's at the plate. Okay. And I saw something online. I think it was Jason Stark talking about how this is we get into analytics sometimes, like, well, why do we go that route? Because I think in this case you can explain something. He mentioned that Turner's launch angle this year is up 4 degrees over the rest of his career. So normally he swings at a 12 degree launch angle, and this year he's swinging at 16. And and Jason, and this is where you dive into what goes into a writer's story. Jason later mentions that he talked to Kevin Long, and that Kevin Long says, ultimately he's got other concerns that are even more pressing than Trey Turner. And I think we know who that is. But the point is that he's not like looking that data up on his own. Like, I don't think Jason's sitting there going, I wonder what Trey Turner's launch angle is. Let me look it up and compare to that. Had to come from that conversation, right? So Kevin Long is telling Jason Stark that you have a situation where the player is not swinging at the same swing plane that he normally swings at. And Jason also mentioned that he thought it had something to do with the World Baseball Classic, because Turner hit 5 home runs in the World Baseball Classic. And so maybe there was something that he was doing there, or they were asking him to do there, that changed his swing a little bit, and he hasn't been able to rectify it to this point. And so you have a guy who's swinging with a more of an uppercut, missing fastballs, and that's how teams are attacking him. Can you imagine saying, I'm going to attack Trey Turner by just throwing him fastballs? It's crazy to think, but that's what teams are doing. The fact that Long isn't as concerned with it and thinks he'll figure it out, and that tells Jason he's got other fish to fry other than Trey Turner, lets me feel like at least the hitting side is going to come around. I buy into Kevin Long. I think the guy's pretty obviously really good at what he does, and has a real good assessment for players. So I think that he's going to be on point with that. But Turner's defense has been completely underwhelming. Completely. Even on plays where, he does what was the one? I mean, he gets a hit, and it was a hit. It's not an error, but it goes into that slide to try and pick the ball. Was that Friday night? And tries to come up with it and doesn't come up with it. Like, it's in his glove and it doesn't, he doesn't get it. Like, little things like that, even though it's not an error, it's like, man, if he just makes that play and the ball's in his glove, it changes the complexity of the inning.
I think it's a situation where you have a player that has been very successful that has not gone. I mean, if you pick apart his previous seasons, he's had stretches, as does every player, where it doesn't go well. And I mean, those stretches might even extend over 30, 40 games. But it's because you have a new city, a new contract, a big contract,
Yeah.
a lot of expectation. It's all being accentuated right now. These struggles are magnified. And that's just to be fair. And so I think when you fast forward this thing another 120 games, it starts to even out. But right now, I do think you have a little bit of a situation where the player is feeling those failures. And and I don't want to, I almost feel like I'm letting him off the hook by saying that. Like, well, he's not hitting. So now he's taking that into the field defensively. Sometimes I think that that's weak. Sometimes it's like, you know what? Do your job, split them up, take care of what you have to take care of. But I just think we're watching a player maybe just, and when I say this, it's almost kind of ironic because I want to say that he's pressing and trying too hard. But one of the things that I think is most frustrating about this for a lot of fans is that it doesn't look like he's trying too hard.
Right.
That ball went through his glove on Saturday night, and it was just kind of like, could you do any less? Like, and I think that that's where like some of this angst is kind of coming into play a little bit.
Well, I think the angst is fair because, let's go back a year. And I know Castellanos got off to a little bit of a faster start in April last year. And then he started to slowly go down after that. And maybe it wasn't 40 games, maybe it was like 60, 65 games in where we started to say, yeah, we need more out of this guy. Yeah, we need more out of this guy. Oh, his track record is what it is. It'll come around. He'll come around. And then, of course, he never did last year. And so I kind of feel like that's where we're at with Trey Turner right now is like, oh, yeah, he'll come around. He'll come around. Well, he better because they need him. Yeah. Like last year, the Phillies were able to mask Castellanos a little bit because they had so much other talent around him. And yes, there's still a lot of talent around Trey Turner, but without Hoskins in your lineup and an ability to have that extra pop, the holes are going to become more noticeable when multiple guys are not going well. And they need Turner. They're going to need Turner this year. They're part of the reason they're 500 and not a little bit over 500 is because Trey Turner hasn't been Trey Turner. I mean, let's be honest.
As you were talking, I went in and dug up the numbers against fastballs. And I mean, last year he hit 323 against fastballs with a 516 slugging percentage. This year he's hitting 233 against fastballs. So he's down 90 points with a 384 slugging percentage. I mean, that was a precipitous drop. And it is alarming. And again, you talk about Kevin Long and he's confident and doesn't have a ton of concern and thinks that this thing will even out in time. And that's great. But this is not a week. This is not 2 weeks. This is 40 games. And it is time for him to turn this thing around. And by the way, this isn't like batted ball, bad luck stuff. I mean, his expected batting average last year against fastballs was 294. So he did out hit that a little bit a year ago. This year it's 248. So it's not like he's hitting into a ton of bad luck. It's not like his expected average is 285 and he's hitting 233 against fastballs. I mean, he's pretty much in line with what the expected outcome is this year.
Yeah, and he's striking out a lot, Bob. I think he's got 47 strikeouts already, I want to say, compared to like 10 walks. I mean, it's a terrible ratio. And that's off the top of my head. I don't know if you have it in front of you. You can correct me if my numbers are off. But it's a really bad ratio and something. He's never been a big strikeout guy. I mean, like, he strikes out. Don't get me wrong. I think his career high is 130 or 131 strikeouts in a season.
He struck out 131 times last year. He actually struck out 132 times in 2018. Okay. So we've been here before with him.
But he's pacing a lot higher than that. I mean, if you go on pace, I think it's like 185 now or something like that. If you do it out over, I mean, just multiply it by 4, whatever he's at right now, times it by 4, that's what he's pacing out to. And that's significantly higher than his career highs, his career worst numbers. And when you start getting up into that 180, 190 strikeout range, you're in Kyle Schwarber territory, right? I mean, and you can't have that with Trey Turner.
He's striking out right now every 4 times for every 1 walk. So it's essentially 46 strikeouts, 12 walks. So I mean, you're talking about almost like a 4-to-1 ratio here.
Yeah,
That's not good.
No, it's
For
not
a guy
good.
that you want to hit at the top of your order, who's supposed to be a speed and chaos guy, who is going to hit probably 20-25, but isn't a 40 home run guy. That's not what you want.
No, and if that paces out to 184 strikeouts,
Yeah, I mean, that's
over
50
a
more
season,
strikeouts than his previous career high.
that's a lot for a top of the order guy. That is a lot,
Yeah.
and that's problematic.
Yeah. I think the other thing that we look at, and I want to talk about the brawl, and I'm using air quotes. If you're watching this on YouTube, you see my hands go up. But if you're listening to this, it didn't quite escalate to that degree. But I want to just real quick kind of put a bow on the whole Rockies thing and just get to Aaron Nola, because you can't go through an Aaron Nola start without talking about Aaron Nola. And you know that I've been pretty critical of him. In general, I really didn't have much of an issue with the way that he threw the baseball yesterday. I thought that he was better than the line indicated. I thought, mentioning Trey Turner, I don't think he was done any favors defensively early on. I thought that kind of set a difficult tone for him. And certainly the Phillies didn't hit either. So I think that all needs to be said. The only concern I have, I think, coming out of the game yesterday is that the fastball velocity was down a little bit again against the season average. It was certainly down start over start, because we saw it flash a little bit his last time out.
Right.
And so now not only is it down start over start, but it was down against the season average, and he threw it 34 times yesterday, and it was down by about a half a mile per hour. So it just, again, is this situation where you're like, he maxed out at 93. I think he averaged 91.2 with it, and his season average is 91.7. I just would feel a lot better about this if there was just a little bit more of a consistency with the velocity. But I still think when you look at his last handful of starts, for the most part, you say, okay, is this top of the rotation stuff? No, but is it like sound the alarm? Oh my God, what are we watching? No.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think it was the greatest start. I mean, I thought, look, he pitched himself into a little bit of trouble early. I mean, the walk is what really hurts. I mean, the 3 hits he gives up in the first inning are 3, soft contact hits. There wasn't anything.
What did I say about the Marsh play yesterday? Like, I don't know where Coors Field is, like, in proportion to the rest of the state of Colorado. But what did I say? I was like, is Brandon Marsh playing in Aspen? Like, where the hell is this guy playing? Like,
yeah, and I mean, that's a ball that in most places is caught. I mean, you have the Turner throwing error. Even Bryson Stott, I mean, it didn't lead to a run, but he had a ground ball that should have been an easy double play, ends up only being a force out because he bobbles it. Sosa had a play where like he had his play where he made a mistake in it was the second inning. So yeah, Nola was not given any help with his defense, but still, you get into a bases loaded, no outs jam. I mean, right off the bat, and that's, you got to get an out in there. The home run was a shitty pitch. It was just a hanging curveball. It was such a bad pitch. And then you got to go get Chris Bryant, and that that at bat is, he gets the hit up the middle. You got to get him, and that's all like that. So like there are moments in the start where you sit there and go, yeah, Nola's got to be better in those couple of moments. But you're right. I mean, if you take the totality of the last 6 starts, his numbers are pretty good overall. I mean, they're pretty Aaron Nola-ish. Let's just put it that way. Other than the strikeouts, and that goes back to what you're talking about. The fastball velocity isn't there. I mean, you probably have the numbers sitting in front of you. Again, I'm not looking at them, but I'm just going off of what I watched. It almost seemed like he threw a lot more curveballs and changeups and cutters yesterday than he would normally do. Like, I felt like he had fewer fastballs. Especially early. Maybe he started to throw them a little bit more later. But I mean, again, I think that it's a situation where he recognizes the velocity is not where he wants it, and now he feels like he's got to pitch his way out of that. And you could see him like trying to process it and figure it out, and maybe pitch a little backwards to try and get his way through some of these starts. And that to me is where the concern is, because he shouldn't have to do that. I mean, he shouldn't have to be relying so much on secondary stuff. He should be able to set up his secondary stuff with the fastball and not spot the fastball as a response to the secondary stuff, if that makes sense.
Yeah, he went 30 of his 102 pitches, 34 fastball. That was 33%. Knuckle curve 28.
Yeah,
which is 27%, and changeup he threw 21 times. So
that's a lot of secondary pitches, right?
A lot secondary pitches. I agree. So I mean, I think it's funny. We always have a way of doing things. Like if you were hosting a Phillies podcast the day after Bryce Harper almost killed somebody, a lot of hosts would come on and that would be the lead. And and I guess it could have been, bad production by me, but I'm watching this yesterday, and in the moment, I'm more results oriented. I'm like, are you winning or are you losing?
Yeah,
that's what I want to talk about. But let's get into this situation that happens late in the game yesterday. Here's what I'll say.
Before you dive into it, let me just say this. Good podcasts would put it at the 25-minute mark, because it gets people hanging around a little bit longer to hear what we have to say about it. Anyway, go ahead, continue.
Yeah, I mean, so Jake Bird goes out. He's all over the place. He gets a double play, and then he gets a fly out, gets out of the inning because the Phillies strand a bunch of runners again, don't hit with runners on base. And this is a thing that we've seen in baseball now for a number of years. Guys getting pumped up, and there's this fine line about the unwritten rules and etiquette. It's you can make a show out of what you did and point to yourself and do your thing. But when you kind of direct it at the other dugout, that's where things tend to go in the wrong direction. And that's what happened, right? He starts chirping at the Phillies dugout. He's pointing at himself. He's clapping the glove. And Bryce Harper didn't like that. So he comes out and he goes after Bird and he disappears and the bench is clear and everyone meets behind the plate and all hell breaks loose. No punches are thrown and it kind of de-escalates pretty quickly. Here's why takeaway as I watch the 76ers get blown out in a game 7 by the Boston Celtics. And by the way, here you go. Full disclosure, I don't fancy myself a huge Sixers fan. So the pain and the anger and the disappointment that a lot of people in this city are feeling right now about the 76ers, I was disappointed for those people, but myself, I didn't go to bed last night on a different planet about what had happened in Boston. But I'll say this, it's really interesting watching the Sixers just fold this heartless, lifeless, gutless effort in the second half against the Celtics. And then I watch the Phillies are angry. They're pushing back. They have a little bit of juice. And there's plenty of criticism that you can level at this Phillies team through 40 games. But the one thing that I think that you saw start last year that has carried over into this year is that there is a different feeling in that clubhouse. There is I have your back. I have a sense of accountability. We're going to come get you if you cross us. And so as you watch this one team roll over and die, you watch the Phillies have this fire and anger and aggression that's bottled by Bryce Harper. And it is very hard. And I know people are like, come on, these are two totally different things, two totally different situations. I'm sorry. It was really, really interesting to watch Joel Embiid go out and have absolutely nothing, had nothing after the game, said all the wrong things, all the wrong body language. And then you have Bryce Harper in the 40th game of the season, doesn't like what an opponent's saying to his dugout, and he's ready to rip the guy's head off. That was pretty noticeable to me.
Yeah, no, I loved it. I loved every minute of it. And I loved it because I think that there's even more context, right? I mean, look, there's no question that it was a frustrating day for the Phillies. A lot of their own doing, right? But when you add in the fact that, they're having a bad day, as a team, and then you add into the fact that Rob Thompson gets tossed for arguing a call that he was 100% right about, that was a ball to Kyle Schwarber and not a strike. Okay, so that starts the thing going with the umpires. The double play, Jake Bird was terrible. Let's be honest. He couldn't throw a strike, okay? The double play ball, Edmundo Sosa swings at a ball, I think it was a 2-0 count, that was in on his hands. It should have been ball 3, and he swings at it and grounds into the double play. But then the Phillies want to review the double play because the second baseman's foot was up off the bag when he caught the ball. So runner Brandon Marsh should have been safe at second. And the second base umpire, Jeff Nelson, refuses to let them review it because he said it took too long to put the call in, which I don't know. I watched it in real time. I thought it was well within the time frame of that's necessary. So then you have that whole thing happening, right? And I'm sure that the Phillies were a little bit, they were on Bird a little bit because he couldn't throw a strike. I mean, let's be honest. I don't think Jake Bird was just responding to nothing, right? I mean, getting fired up over nothing. So the Phillies probably were egging him on a little bit. And then the fly out by Stott, 3-1 count, ball 4 gets called strike 2. Okay, so now, I mean, like, so the Phillies' frustration level is mounting and mounting and mounting. And then Stott flies out, and it's like, okay, well, this is just one of those days. And then you got this jackass now he's chirping the dugout and talking like he did something really great when he was lucky to be to be able to get out of that inning. And that just sends Harper off, right? That's what sends him over. And the best part about the whole thing, Bob, is, and you can, far be it from us from being lip readers, okay, but I mean, it's quite obvious.
I saw it, yes.
That Bryce Harper calls the Rockies a loser fucking organization, which is, I think, fantastic. And so like the whole thing is great. Like I love that. I love that you won 5 in a row. Okay, you're feeling pretty good about yourself and the way the team's playing. You just having one of those games. It's an off game, which really is what it was overall. And there's a lot of frustration built into the game. And yet you still come together as a group and go out there to support each other and say the things that need to be said. That's great. I think they go into San Francisco now, guns a-blazing tonight. I feel pretty good about the Phillies coming off of that yesterday.
Well, what a transition, because you talk about the Giants, and, I don't think that either of us is particularly impressed by the Giants.
No.
But so, like the Phillies have had issues in Colorado over the years, San Francisco has not proven to be one of the most friendly confines for this team. They've struggled in San Francisco. Yep. And I look at this Giants team, and I start to kind of dig into what to expect this week. And I am a little bit, I don't want to say I'm concerned. I'm not concerned about a 3-game series in the middle of May. But I don't know that this is going to be quite as easy as it looks on paper going in, because you feel good about the Phillies' direction. You don't think the Giants are a very good opponent, but you start to dig into these pitching matchups a little bit. And tonight, the Phillies are going to see Alex Wood, who has not thrown much this season. He's coming off of an injury. He pitched on Friday night, 1 inning, to kind of get his some work in before this scheduled start. So he's making a return on Monday night. He's decent arm. And you're going to come with an opener and Bailey Falter. So, like, if I just look at the pitching matchup from a purely a matchup standpoint, it probably favors the Giants tonight. And then you come back with Wheeler and Alex Cobb in game 2. And we all, obviously feel really good about Zach Wheeler, but Alex Cobb has actually been one of the lone bright spots for the Giants this season. He's thrown the ball very well. You're not going to see Sean Manaea, who would have been scheduled to pitch in this series. He has been an absolute disaster. 7.96 ERA, 8 appearances. You're not getting him. You're at least not going to get him at the start of a game. So I do look at this and say, like, okay, this could be a little bit more of a challenge than you might have otherwise thought coming in. I don't know what your reaction is to that, but seeing Alex Wood tonight and not seeing a guy like Sean Manaea, as bad as he's been, like, that makes your path a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, it certainly does. I mean, the Giants, their starting pitching has not been their problem, right, this year. That's not been the major concern for them. They've got so many other issues that are coming up. I just, I do think you're right that the pitching matchup favors the Giants tonight. And like you said, Cobb's been great for the Giants so far. Look, we saw from Wheeler, though, how he pitched against the Blue Jays. And if he can pitch like that against the Blue Jays, I don't necessarily know that the Giants have a lineup that can even come close to remotely touching him. So the Phillies in that game, they have to work the camp. They have to work the pitcher. They have to work Cobb. They have to get him out of the game and get into the Giants bullpen, which sucks. Okay, that's where the Phillies are going to have to do their damage in that game. And we don't know who the Giants are throwing, I guess, in the closing game of the series. But I will say Taijuan Walker, last 2 times out, has looked pretty sharp. Been pretty good, right? With that split finger fastball really being the dominant pitch that it needs to be. So, I look at it and say I still like the Phillies in 2 of the 3 matchups. I'll take Wheeler over Cobb, even Cobb, though Cobb's pitched well. and I, not knowing who the Giants are throwing the third game, but the way Walker's been throwing, I'll take the Phillies matchup there, no matter who the Giants are pitching. So I think I like 2 of the 3 pitching matchups. Should they win 2 out of 3 this series? They really should. So I'm okay with it going into this series, where looking at it just from a pitching matchup perspective.
Just looking at the comps, like offensively, the Phillies and Giants have both scored 4.33 runs per game this season. So, like, offensively, I know that they have a little bit of a different approach. I actually mentioned it earlier in the show. Giants have maximized their home runs. I mean, they've hit almost twice as many home runs with runners on base than the Phillies. But just in terms of when you look at the lineup and the actual talent in the lineup, you certainly would think that favors the Phillies. And one of the reasons why I bring this up, because like previewing series, I think is kind of, especially at this point in the season, you're like, well, whatever, right?
Right.
But we were just kind of in a similar spot with this team 2 weeks ago, where they get the first 2 in Houston. They get a couple games over 500. They have an opportunity to finish off a sweep. They don't do it. Then it bleeds over into this disastrous series against the Dodgers. Then they have a couple bad games against the Red Sox. And then they come from a few games or a couple games over 500 back under. And then they have to dig themselves out of that hole. And then it kind of gets back to this weekend where they have this opportunity to sweep. They don't do it. You said it earlier, like you're talking about a 4-2 road trip, a 5-1 road trip. I don't expect the Phillies to sweep the Giants this week, but I do expect them to win the series. Like, don't let a road trip that begins 2-0 turn into a 3-3 road trip where you're coming back to Citizens Bank Park again next weekend, under 500, looking to win a series to get back to 500. Like, this team, I really want to see them get over this hump and stay over this hump. Like, yes, it is great. We've talked about stabilizing and having some resilience, and like, that is great, right? And that should be applauded, that they haven't let this thing go off the rails where they're going to be 8 games under on Memorial Day again. At least it would seemingly be impossible for that to happen.
Yeah, they can't have them lose. They would have to lose 9 of 10 in order for that to happen.
So I think that that's a safe bet that will not happen. But how about get 4 or 5 games over? Like, let's clear that hurdle, and then let's get 10 games over. Like, that's where this team has to get to. And like, I just feel like I would not be stunned whatsoever if they go out and they lose tonight, and then they split the last 2 games of the series. They're under 500. They're playing the Cubs this week. Like, I just feel like it's the same damn thing on like a spin cycle right now.
Well, the one thing I will give Rob Thompson a lot of credit for is his ability to identify that you can get well with these incremental steps, right? I mean, the one thing is like you look at each series and say, go 2-1. You may not be thrilled with going 2-1, right? But if you go 2-1 and then you put a string a few of those together, you're eventually going to get to where you want to go. And you always hear him say, our first goal was to get to 500. Our next goal is to get 5 games over 500. And then after that, our next goal is to get 10 games over 500. And even if it takes a little bit of time to go from one step to the next, that remains like the short-term goal. And so being able to segment it out like that, I think you get to a point where you go, okay, that's not bad. And it's funny because we're sitting here, and I think you were the one who even said it, like, hey, if we get to 20-20 after that Colorado Rockies series, we're kind of okay. All right, we're going in the right direction. And so here they are, and yet we're, in the moment, we're a little bit less excited about it because it's like, oh man, they could have been a little bit higher.
Right, and I'm okay with it, but it's just like, don't mess it up this week. Don't mess it up.
No, I agree with you. 100% agree with you. But that's what I'm trying to say. Like, I think sometimes, and I do the same thing because I get frustrated within the moment, within the game, within the series. That you sit there and go, oh man, they should have won that game, or oh man, they should have had a better inning there. But if you take a longer view look at it, I think it's okay. I think that, it's easy for us to do that. We're so entrenched with this team on a daily basis. It's easier for us to kind of get that way. But if you can step back and can look at it bigger picture, you can see that, hey, winning 2 out of 3 that's a really good thing.
If we were running a Braves podcast, we've talked a lot about where this team's at. I'm kind of like over I'm over the like just get in and see what happens thing. Like, I expect the Phillies to not win this division. I expect them to win a wild card And then, your guess is as good as mine from there. Like, maybe they have a favorable matchup. Maybe, Nola and Wheeler go out and they win a series, a short series like they did in St. Louis last year. And maybe the team's in the World Series again. I don't know. I'd like to see this organization, this team sort of realign its expectations and its goals. And I'm not saying that they don't want to win the division or they're not trying to do that. But right now, I think on paper, you say like, okay, the Braves are the better team. We've talked about digging this hole early in the season. It's gone as much as 8.5 games. Now it's down to 5. They're kind of hanging around. They haven't played Atlanta yet. Like, there will be an opportunity to take a shot here and get themselves into the division mix. And I started this by saying, if we were running a Braves show, like, what level of concern would you have about the Atlanta Braves right now? Because what we do is we take this hyper-focused look at the Phillies all the time, and we say, this is what's going well, this is what's not going well, we're concerned about this. From afar, though, I look at the Braves and I say, you're supposed to, we saw what we picked to be the World Series matchup play out over the weekend between the Blue Jays and the Braves. And the Braves got swept. So Max Fried's out. Kyle Wright's out. Like, should the Braves be concerned about their grip on this division?
I say yes, and the only reason I say yes is let's just look at each team has 9 games coming up before they play each other. Okay, and the Phillies were able to shave off 3 games in a week, which is big. That's normally you say if you can get one a week when you're chasing a team, if you can get 1 game back each week, then you're progressing nicely. They got 3 in a week, which is good. Phillies' next 9 games are the Giants, Cubs, and Diamondbacks. Not the greatest gauntlet, right? These teams are. Giants stink. I think the Cubs are mediocre, and Arizona's okay, but just okay.
Well, here you go. I'm going to bat that on 3. You're out west. Don't win against the Giants. We talked about the pitching matchup.
Yeah.
Some concerns there. The Cubs were 6-0 against the Phillies last year.
Yeah.
And the Diamondbacks are your squad. And one of, as I said earlier, 5 teams that have a winning record right now in the National League. They're one of them.
Yeah. So, I agree.
But okay.
But in comparison, let's make a comparison. The Braves' next 9 games are the Texas Rangers, who are first place in the AFC American League West, and really kind of been one of the better teams in baseball, in all honesty. And I think a little bit of a surprise with that. The Mariners, who should be better than they are. They're kind of a middle ground team, and the Dodgers, who are playing really good baseball. So, is there an opportunity for the Phillies to go from 5 to maybe 3 over the next 9 games? Like, can they pick up another 2 games before they go into a 4-game series in Atlanta and then really make that series a real, checkpoint kind of series in the season? Yes. So, that's why I look at it and say, yeah, if I'm the Braves, I'm a little bit concerned that, you look in the rearview mirror and that object that is the Phillies logo is maybe a little bit closer than you realize. So yeah, I do think that this is setting up okay for the Phillies. They have to do their part. They definitely have to do their part. But if you look at what's coming before you go into the big matchup between the 2 teams next weekend, or not this coming weekend, the following weekend, that it does play in the Phillies' favor.
Let me ask you a question. We didn't prep for this, and then we'll kind of turn the page and we can wrap things up here. But we've spent a lot of time. I think people that listen to our show on a consistent basis would say that I think we're pretty fair. Like, when things go well, I think we do talk about it. Do we have a tendency maybe over the years to slant negative? Maybe. Like, I think, because I think it's more interesting to talk about things that concern you. I just do. And I think that's where my mind sort of goes. And it's not intentional. It's not meant to be. It's not meant to be negative.
Look, Bob, you're a coach. You were a coach, right? I've always fancied myself as one, even though I never really was. I was at the youth level, and I do it with stupid softball, right? But I've always fancied myself in that way. So we're conditioned, I think, to look at things with a more critical eye, even when things are going well, right?
And it's what can be improved. What can we do here better? And while also keeping the things that are working for you going in a positive direction. But yeah, that's just where my mind goes. It's always wanting more. How do you improve? And I just think that that's the way that it should be consumed.
And that
So
doesn't make it that to me that doesn't mean that we're negative. I think that means we're looking at it with a, with a critical eye, with the intention of how can it be better, not oh my god, this team sucks. Like I don't think we're on that plane of negativity.
So the question and the reason why I bring this up is I suppose it's a two-part thing. Of all the things that you have seen that have concerned you, like I think we've used the word or the term red flag on this show probably a handful of times
Sure.
since the start of the season. Of all the things that you have seen that have concerned you, which one gives you the greatest concern still moving forward?
It's a good question. It's a good question because I have a few things that I'm concerned about, but I think that the most concerning, if I had in the way that you framed it, it's still to me depth. And when I say that because obviously there's a concern with the number 5 spot in the rotation right now. We talked about it last week, and neither of us are believing Bailey Falter will get out of this malaise that he's been in to start the year. And they don't really have anything coming unless Painter gets healthy, which they're obviously taking their time with, and they don't have another piece down there. I look at the bench, and I think that the bench is really disappointing at this point. Garrett Stubbs aside because he's the backup catcher, but when you look at your bench right now, and Harrison's giving you nothing, and Dalton Guthrie doesn't really give you anything, and Cody Clemens doesn't really give you a lot.
I think he's actually given them more than you could expect.
Probably.
How about that?
And he's hitting 180, and he's giving you more than he could expect.
I think he's contributed at appropriate times. Like he's had some big hits that have stood up for this team. But yes, I mean, can you stand to upgrade there? Sure.
Yeah, that bothers me, right? It concerns me that they don't have better options than what's there. So depth, I think, is ultimately the thing that I am most concerned about. I could put an easy 1A on the approach at the plate sometimes because it's so hit or miss, and they're really at the current moment being carried by 3 guys in the lineup. When you really look at it, I mean, it's Harper, Castellanos, and Real Muto are the 3 guys that are really carrying this lineup with occasional contributions from other players. And that bothers me when 2/3 of your lineup is inconsistent. So yeah, I mean, that's also an issue, but I would say depth right now is my biggest concern. The only place I feel comfortable with the depth is the bullpen. I think that they have good arms out there, and they can overcome an injury or two with what they have there. But other than that, no, I don't like where they are numbers wise.
You have a lot of confidence in Kevin Long, and I think that there's a good reason to. I look at the individual pieces of this lineup and I skew positive on almost all of them. Like I believe that Alec Boehm is better than what we've seen over the last month. I think that Bryson Stott is not what we saw in April, but isn't what we've seen for the last 4 weeks now. I think there's more than that. I expect Kyle Schwarber to get it together. I believe in Nick Castellanos. Obviously, Bryce Harper is a different animal. This lineup, though, aggregated, it concerns me. I don't know what it is. You say it's approach. I agree, I guess. I expected even with Rhys Hoskins to go down, or even when Rhys Hoskins went down, I still thought there's enough firepower here that it's going to be felt, but it's not going to be really felt. And they're feeling it. I'm concerned about this offense. I am. And I'm concerned about the starting pitching, the back end of the rotation. Aaron Nola gives me some pause. But when I just go through the list of things that concern me moving forward, it's the one thing that you kind of almost, I think a lot of fans are like, yeah, I wouldn't be concerned about that. It'll be okay. And I get it because on an individual basis, I think it's going to be okay. But together, this lineup concerns me, man. Like, they are not scoring on a consistent basis. Even look at the last 4 games. Look at the last 4 games that you feel pretty good about. They don't score for 8 innings against Kevin Gausman on Wednesday. They get gifted a run in the 10th inning by Bo Bichette in a walk-off. They had opportunities in the 9th to win the game. They don't do it. Fast forward to Friday night. You're in Coors Field, by the way, against a bad pitching staff. You don't do anything for 6 innings. You just gift away 6 innings in about 55 minutes. They what's his name? Feltner on Saturday night. He walks a couple guys early. They get a couple hits. It's 4-0. They actually should have probably put 6 or 7 on the board the way that inning went down. They don't do anything for 6 innings, and Bryce Harper delivers late. And then yesterday they're shut out. Like, they were not an impressive offense this weekend. Like, and that's where you say, like, hey, you want a little bit more. 2 out of 3. You can't argue with 2 out of 3. But when you really dig into what this team has done offensively over the last 4 games, it hasn't been much. And the reason why that matters is because, yeah, like, they did a little bit on Sunday against the Red Sox last week and that opener against the Blue Jays, but you go back before that and they weren't hitting. So, like, this offense, it's like, come on, man, like, you got to give me a little bit more now. And we've talked about all the reasons it's not firing on all cylinders, all the issues that it's had, but I think through 40 games, I'm actually now officially concerned about the upside of this offense.
It's not. I mean, you pointed out what 4.4 is like their average runs per game. I think
4.33 runs per game.
Yeah. Okay. And I guess under normal circumstances, you say, yeah, okay, that's about average, right? It's about league average. I would assume. I'm not even looking at the stats.
I have it right here, actually. So, yeah, they are about average. They are tied for 16th with the Giants in runs per game.
Okay, so it's league average. They need to be better than league average. That's what we expect. And it's no doubt. I mean, you look at it. I think I wrote it. When they score 5 runs or more, they're 12-2 this season. Right, so that means that they're
12-2 and they score 5 runs or more. So that means they've only scored 5 runs in a game 14 times.
I'm pretty sure. I was double checking it as you were just giving that little mini monologue there, just to kind of make sure my math is right. And I'm going to do it one more time. The next time you speak, I'm just going to quickly go through it. I have it right in front of me, and I think that I'm almost certain it's 12-2. But that tells you that it's only 14 times that they've scored 5 runs. Right. And they've had a few games in there where they've scored a ton of runs, obviously, that we had a 15-run game and a 13-run game. But yeah, I mean, if they're only 8-18 when they're scoring less than 5 runs in a game, that's a concern.
Yeah.
Now you got a question. You say, is that concern on the pitching or is that concern with the lineup? It's probably a little bit of both. But it also shows the inconsistency of the lineup. I mean, they've been shut out, 4 times now? 5 times?
Twice by Colorado. Yeah.
Twice by the Rockies of all teams. 4 times in 40 games. I mean, you're getting shut out once every 10 games. That's a lot. That's a lot in baseball. So, yeah, I agree. I mean, I agree with you. Don't get me wrong. I agree. And I think if we go back probably a few weeks, I think you asked me what my biggest concern with the team was at that point, and I think I said it was the lineup. And so I think it's kind of I'm right there with you. I just in the moment I think that depth is a concern, but I'm the lineup is an issue for me because it doesn't get on base enough and it's not productive when it needs to be productive. And I think those are two things. One, I think that can be rectified, but the other I'm not convinced it can be.
I have one other question for you. I want to throw out one more because I think it's fun to do it at the quarter point because I'm looking ahead to mid-season now. So the next lap, once the next lap is finished around the track, let's say this team is a postseason team. Right now they haven't played their best baseball. I don't think they've even come close to playing their best baseball, and they're still right now, if the season ended today, in the postseason. So let's project that out. How many players on a postseason roster have yet to wear a Phillies uniform yet this season? And so the reason why I frame the question this way is because let's say, Jake Cave comes back up or there's an injury and they have to shuffle for depth. And there's a guy sitting out in Lehigh right now that ends up here. Yeah. So a guy that has yet to wear a Phillies uniform in a regular season game this season, how many of those players will be on a potential playoff roster come the middle of the year?
5.
Okay.
5.
So this team is going to make a series of trades that brings in 5 new players.
I wouldn't say that the trades are going to bring in 5 new players.
Look at it this way: who internally has yet to wear a uniform that will and stick in October?
Painter is probable. There might be a reliever, probably that has a chance to do that. that hasn't worn a jersey yet. Yeah, I mean, so maybe you look at 2 internal candidates and maybe you trade for 3.
Three.
Maybe you trade for a bat, a starter, and a reliever. I mean, that's just kind of, it's probably 4. I mean, 4 or 5 is probably the better answer. I don't necessarily know if you need the reliever. Maybe you don't. We'll kind of determine that as we go forward here. But I do think they need another starting pitching option, and I do think they need another bat, at least one, for if not 2 for the bench.
Okay, and I was just going to ask you that. Is that bat a bench bat? Is that bat a middle of the order bat? What is that bat?
It's a great question. So ultimately, I think this will depend on if Bryce Harper can play first base at a major league level. If he can, and there's no reason to doubt him, obviously, with the way he plays the game, then I think you only need to really add one guy. Like I would be comfortable if you can add a third baseman and Edmundo Sosa becomes a bat off the bench. I'm good with that.
Yeah. So you beat me to this because this was the thing that I had on my list of items to talk about. And I decided because, we're picking apart some things here. We have reached the overexposure of Edmundo Sosa phase for me. I've talked about this. Good players that you like a lot that are really valuable to your team. And I think that there are different ways that you can go about this. There are players that you can only see twice a week to get the best out of them. Like I've said this about Jake Cave. Like I think he's a 2 times per week guy.
Yeah.
There's the players that you can see 3 or 4 times a week to get the best out of them. And then there's the everyday guy. And I don't think that Edmundo Sosa is a twice a week guy, but he is not a 6-day a week guy.
Correct.
And we're there with him now. Like,
yeah,
we've reached the sample of the season where I think I can say that.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's a guy that you can have in your lineup. He could can he give you 400 at bats and not kill you? Yeah, he can. I mean, you're going to always have that guy in your lineup. It's just, the way baseball is as far as the depth of the sport and, managing the money with your salary. So, yeah, I mean, you're going to have guys on the roster who you have to put into that kind of position. And Edmundo Sosa can be that guy and not be a black hole in the lineup. But there are, you do see the warts when you play him every day. And that, if you can upgrade that, then you should.
Yeah, and this is what I'd like to see in a perfect world. And I can't believe I'm about to say what I'm about to say. But I would like to see a bat that gives the production that was lost by Rhys Hoskins. Like, I'd like to see a starting caliber, middle of the order. Doesn't have to be a 3, but like a guy that you could hit in the back end of the middle of the order, a 6, which is where I think Rhys Hoskins would have thrived. I've always kind of argued that, like, it's not that he's a bad hitter. It's that he's been tasked with too much.
Right.
I'd like to see. Here's another take. I don't want to see Bryce Harper play first base this season. I don't see the upside in it. Like, what I would like to see is them acquire a first baseman or a third baseman, so you can leave Bohm at first or swing him back to third. Give me another corner infielder that brings corner of the infield offensive production. Have Bryce Harper. And the reason why I don't want to see him play, because 1, I want to see another bat. I want to see a fresh bat come in that has some thump. And 2, I don't want to run any risk whatsoever of any re-injury to that elbow. And if that means that Bryce Harper doesn't throw a baseball in a Major League Baseball game until next April, then so be it. I just would like to see another option come in. I'd like to see Edmundo Sosa be that bench guy, super utility guy. That's what I'd like to see.
As long as Bryce Harper doesn't hurt his arm in a brawl.
As long as he doesn't try to punch an opposing pitcher in a brawl, yes. Yeah. Which for a moment yesterday, you're like, here we go. Here goes the season.
No, but I joke, but you're right. You're right. I mean, I do want to see the same thing. I'd like to see.
And that's nothing against Bryce Harper. Like I think this goes without saying, but like I'm not rooting against his progression physically. Like
right, no.
He can do it. I hope he's more than able to do it. I'd love for him to be able to go play right field tomorrow in a perfect world. But
sure,
I just don't see the. I get the flexibility and certainly getting Schwarber out of left field on a daily basis. Like that's why getting Bryce Harper to first base is key. But I'd like to just have a little bit of everything, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, look, and that's the secondary part of it. Again, if Harper can play first base, then maybe you don't have to get a third baseman. You can go Alec Bohm over at third, but then maybe the bat you add is a corner outfielder and Schwarber becomes a DH.
Right.
I mean, right? I mean, that's what I would do.
It gives you
So
more, it gives you more flexibility.
gives you a little bit more flexibility. So yeah, I mean, but would I like to see another bat that's in the lineup and not just on the bench? Yes, I would. Yes, I would. So, all right, I think it's time for one last thing, Bob.
It is.
And I think we have to do this, and I have to bring this up because we missed the opportunity to do it last time because I think it either had just happened or it happened the night before and we missed it. But we got to talk about it because I think it correlates to Major League Baseball. And that's what took place. And I thought maybe you probably know these people a little bit because of where you used to coach. But what took place in college baseball, where the team from Atlantic Cape Community College was cheating and got caught by having a communication system in the helmets of the players, and it happened against Rowan Gloucester County. And the first baseman for Rowan Gloucester County could hear the communication thing happening in the helmets of the runners when they were on base, and Rowan challenged it. Umpires found it, and the cheating occurred. It was legit. Of course, what makes it even funnier is that they were cheating and they got smoked. I think the final score of that game was like 11-4 or something, right? But the point is that, and this is how to me it ties into Major League Baseball, is this is the direct result. And people wonder why everybody got so fired up about the Houston Astros in 2017. It's this. This is the direct result of when you allow what happened, and it's not that they got allowed, but they were allowed to keep a championship and no players were punished. When you have it so that you could get away with it basically, that no players got in trouble, and the team still kept its championship, and there was no changes made other than a fine, and a couple of managers got knocked out of the game for a couple of years, and they're now both back. When you don't really have a punishment for cheating, this is what it results into, and it's now going to be pervasive throughout the sport at many levels, not just at the Major League level. So I wanted to get your take on it, especially since I think that you know a little bit about it, especially the teams that are involved.
Yeah, a little backstory here. I have fringe involvement with this. So BFA Sports, which does broadcasts of high school games in South Jersey and community college games and a variety of different sporting events, was actually down there for this. And so this is why there's video of it. That's why people are watching this unfold. They do a really good job. I've actually called some games for them as a color analyst this season, actually.
Is this the network that you and Mike McGarry talk about all the time?
McGarry, okay. I do it. Mike Gill from 97.3 does the play-by-play. So we've all worked with this production company. They had nothing to do with this. They just happened to be there to chronicle it, by the way.
Yeah.
But when this happened, I actually was working for BFA, and I caught wind of this. Like there was something crazy that was going on down there, and I never followed up. I just said, I never heard anything about it. I guess there was nothing to it, but I had heard that there was some suspicion about this. And I just said, there's no way. I mean, what are we talking about? So I do not know the Atlantic Cape Community College coach, Rodney Velarde, his name is, who was fired. I don't know him. I do know Rob Valley a little bit. He's the RCGC coach. They have one of the best junior college programs on the East Coast. I mean, it's a factory. By all counts, and like I said, I just know him in passing. Rob's a very accomplished coach, a really good guy, a lot of good things said about him. So he's not a guy that I think is like going to create a situation that doesn't exist. Like, he's a guy that's going to confirm the thing 5 different times over before he makes a stink about it.
Right.
And so the way the story plays out, there's a kid, Ethan Dodds, throwing the first game of the series against them. And RCGC is significantly better than Atlantic Cape. They historically have been. They are this year. They're getting really good swings off of them. And he's like, man, that's really weird. Like, we were making pretty good pitches. Like, I don't understand. Like, something just didn't add up. He thought he was tipping pitches. So they're talking about it internally. They come back the next day and they're like, not suspicious, but the antenna was up a little bit, I guess.
Right.
And then the first baseman the next day is standing there and he hears the opponent. There's radio going off in the guy's helmet. And he's like, he comes back to the dugout and he's like, hey, Rob, like, hey, coach, like, I think I hear something at first base. He goes, no way. Like, it's just, there's no way. And then he hears it a second time. He says, it's happening. So then Rob goes out there and says, yo, man, like something's up here. And then they find these devices. I mean, it's an insane story. It's an insane story. And you're right. It's going to happen on different levels now. It's a bad look. Like, and listen, I don't know the full extent of it. I don't know how in tune the coach was. Like, I don't know if it was done around him. I don't know if he was implicit in it. I'm not, I don't want to get like accusatory here or anything like that, but it's a horrible look and it's really embarrassing.
Yeah, but it was the story I read, I saw it on Outkick, was that that the coach was actually using an iPad.
Yeah, he had the iPad
on the bench, which I guess is in that level of baseball is illegal, right? I mean, you're not allowed to have it, or something. There's some kind of limitation, for sure. I think the only communication you're allowed to have is some kind of communication with the bullpen, and I think you're allowed to tell the catcher's allowed to wear an earpiece so that you can call pitches without having to give signs, right? I think that's allowed. But other than that, yeah. So, yeah, man, I worry for the sport sometimes when this is the level that community colleges are willing to. And I know it's a more competitive look. I know in baseball people kind of lose sight of the fact that there are community colleges or JUCO level baseball that is better than some major college programs, right? I mean, it's just the nature of the sport and how it works, because guys who don't get drafted in high school will take that route hoping to get drafted, at 19 or 20, as opposed to getting drafted at 18 or then 22, not waiting 4 years before they're drafted. So
yeah, this was the way that the New York Post wrote it up, just to kind of put a bow on it. It says Valley asked the umpire to check the helmets of his opponents, and the umpire found communication devices in the helmets of the runners on first and second base. Valley suspected but did not have proof that Velarde was using a live stream from center field camera to ascertain the catcher's signs on his iPad. And remember, that live stream is done with no delay. Like, there's it's not on a 7-second delay or anything like that. So it would be in real time. And then he was using that to ascertain the catcher's signs from his iPad. After an investigation, the Atlanta Cape officials said that they couldn't determine whether the team was using the devices during the game or whether or not it was intentionally done, but they were still in violation of the rules. It's not good. It's not good.
What do you think they couldn't tell if they were using it?
Well, I think it's one of those things from a legal standpoint, right? Because, like, if you're going to go...
Why would they even be in the helmets to begin with?
But I think when you're talking about like a guy losing his job, right? Like if you're Atlanta Cape, like you're not sophisticated enough to come to that definitive conclusion where you're going to issue a public statement and say this guy was knowingly cheating, right? Like you can't, because you're opening the door probably to litigation at that point. So you just say, hey, listen, we don't know what the hell was going on, but we do know that these devices were in violation of the rule, and that was enough for the dismissal, and so be it. And I think that's where you go.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
So I don't know. With that said, I don't know what was happening either. But I do know that he was in violation of the rule, according to the Atlanta Cape official.
But to think that level would, teams at that level would stoop to this.
Could
effort.
you? I mean, like I know that you're not exactly like totally dialed into high school athletics, but. I don't know. I know that there are some coaches that are super competitive, right? Like I know there are some coaches that are super competitive and like within the confines of forget tech, but would do what they could reasonably do to pick up signs, get an advantage over a team. I don't think there is a coach. I don't think there's a coach in South Jersey that I know of that would do that. But
I would hope not.
But until you're presented with a direct opportunity to do it, I don't know.
Yeah,
I would like to tell you I wouldn't. I just wouldn't.
Look, I don't mind if you're stealing signs the old-fashioned way. If you got a guy on base who can see what the catcher's flashing and then maybe give a signal to the batter of some kind, by all means, that's part of the game, right? That's just the nature of the game. Be better at hiding your signs. Be better at communicating to the pitcher what you want so that the other team can't steal it. Right? Do that. That's part of the cat and mouse. But when you start using advanced technology to do it and be shady about it and sneaky about it, that's where you cross the line.
Yeah.
So
I think that's a pretty clear line. I think most people will probably be with you on that.
Yeah. I mean, I think, and it blows me away. It just blows me away that at this level that this would be happening. But hey, this is what that brought. If there was a greater penalty at the major league level for what the Houston Astros and then eventually the Boston Red Sox did on a lesser scale, then this stuff would not happen at this level. But the fact that they got away with it, now everybody thinks they can get away with it. So that's why I bring it up on this program and kind of pin it on Major League Baseball.
All right. Well, that will do it for our latest episode of Crossed Up. Check us out on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that you get your shows and podcasts. You can also follow us on Twitter. The show's account is @UpPhillies. You can follow Anthony @AntSamPhilly. Lots of good Flyer stuff, as always. Not that this is unique, but a lot of good Flyer stuff coming from Anthony right now. You can follow me @BobWankelCB as well. We will be back on Friday following this Giants series and ahead of the Cubs series at Citizens Bank Park this upcoming weekend. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we will talk to you soon.